Welcome to the On Call for Men's Health podcast, and I'm Dr. Michael Lutz. This is where we talk about the things you don't want to talk about, but there are conversations that could save your life or the lives of the men you love. And thank you for joining us. And today we're going to talk about prostate cancer, particularly in men in the military. And we're going to talk with a really special guest today, Commander Craig Reiner. Commander Reiner graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1992. As a combat carrier fighter pilot, he's accumulated over 2,500 flight hours, 500 carrier-arrested landings, and 55 combat sorties in an FA-18 Hornet. He's also a prostate cancer survivor and was diagnosed at the age of 42. And he's a very strong advocate for early detection and screening. So, Craig, I just want to thank you for being here and joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
You know, your military history is a real part of who you are. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Sure. I started the Naval Academy in '88. That really started as a fixture of my brother's imagination, my oldest brother, who wanted to become a fighter pilot. And when he looked at the process, he looked at the Naval Academy, he got his eyes tested and they said, "You are not going to be a naval aviator." And that is before they could do corrective surgery and all of that. After that, my middle brother looked at it. He went to the Naval Academy. Before I did, he went on to become a submariner. I followed his footsteps, and the naval aviation dream was really one of mine. So I forced myself through the Naval Academy. I wasn't the greatest student, but I really worked hard. I really started to shine when I got a stick of an airplane in my hand, and that began the journey through naval aviation.
Did you ever fly any other type of jets besides in the military?
No, I had never flown an airplane before I got to flight school. Starting a little trainer, T-34, on to jet training, and then after you get your wings, I went on to fly the F-18 and did so for 20 years.
So just one of my curious questions, what's it like to land a jet on an aircraft carrier at night?
It is probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, and it never got easier. I've got, like I said, 55 combat sorties with different levels of stress, but nothing as much stress as going back to the aircraft carrier at night. Your heart's doing a million miles a minute, million beats, and it's just sheer terror all the way down. It's a little bit easier when there's a big moon and the deck's steady, but by no means is it ever really easy. And when the weather's bad and the deck's moving, it is really, really challenging. And after you land, I don't think there's any naval aviator that said that I was calm, cool, collected while they did that. My feet were always shaking on the rudder pedals, and it was always nice to get below deck after a night landing.
Along the same train of thought, there are other scary things that you've dealt with in your life. You were diagnosed with prostate cancer as a very young man. How old were you when you actually were diagnosed?
42 years old. So it was a very early, a big shock. And that all came about with early testing through the military, which at the time was 40 years of age. And my PSA started at 40, and it was 42 where my PSA essentially doubled, tripled, well below the threshold, but large enough of a change that my flight surgeon, who was not a urologist, said, "I'm going to send you to a specialist." And that began that chapter of my life.
So in those days, they probably just did an ultrasound, did a biopsy, and then they told you you had prostate cancer?
That's correct. I went to the urologist, and I was so young with no family history that the options were on the table to monitor and continue to watch it. But at that stage of my life, I was a single father of 2 children, one of who was special needs, and I knew I had to be around for another 50 years. So I opted for what I call the big boy approach, and I went and got the biopsy. I elected to do that to know for sure. And it came back a couple weeks later as a positive.
Yeah. When you were told it was positive, what kind of decisions did you have to make in the treatment process? Were they giving you alternatives and options for treatment?
Well, it's amazing what you can find out about something you knew very little in 2 weeks waiting for that diagnosis. And by the time I got back to speak to my urologist about that, he was shocked. I was shocked that it actually came back positive. But at that point, as a young man of 42, knowing where they came up with my Gleason score, that there was really only one option, and that was a full prostatectomy.
Yeah. So you had the surgery, and your pathology afterwards, was it everything was confined to the gland and everything was confined within the specimen and you were disease-free?
Yeah, that was the determination. It was all within the prostate when it was removed. Nothing had gotten outside. And again, that's why we're here and we're discussing it. Early detection, I still believe that early catch at age 42 could have saved my life.
Yeah, and it probably did. We'll talk about that. You know, when you were diagnosed, I'm just kind of curious how you shared it with others and, your children or friends. How did those conversations go?
My children were really young. And again, my special needs son doesn't really speak, so he didn't really understand. And my daughter was 6, so she couldn't understand that. But my family, obviously shocked. But just like anything else in my life, lean forward in the straps, take it head on, and I knew right away I was going to beat it and live a long life. So I don't take that as a defining moment in my life. I see it as a step, something to defeat and move on. And I have. And now, as the years have gone on, I continue to try and help others with that early detection and, the process and the follow on. And it's a little bit of my mission. I wish I was better at it, but I do try.
And overall, do you have any treatment regret?
Not even a little.
Oh, that's great. A lot of men do. A lot of men will have regret, if they didn't have the perfect outcome or they had some complications. They'll say, boy, I wish I had chosen the other. And the grass is always greener. But the reality is all treatments have their risks and complications. And, not everything is perfect. And so it's great that you can sit here today, this many years after your initial treatment, and have no regrets and be disease-free and thinking about other aspects of living life.
Yeah. And again, certainly outcomes are different for everyone. I guess it depends on the stage in life and a lot of factors. I can't say I've been completely symptom-free after my prostatectomy. There's always a little bit of a trade-off, but, life continues on. I'm healthy. I feel good, and I'm still here with my family. So, I deal with the minor, what I call nuisance factor of that.
Now, I know you mentioned before you have a couple of brothers. Anybody in your family with prostate cancer?
Not a single person. And, I definitely advocated for them to go get tested. We have no history in my family at all.
So no risk factors in your family. Do you think being a fighter pilot may have played a risk factor?
Yes, I really do. I know that there's studies out there, and I don't know how detailed the military goes into that, but there is some studies out there that said that military, specifically aviators, have a higher risk of cancer and prostate cancer. I certainly believe that was a factor in my life. I spent many, many hours in an F-18, a lot of radiation, lots of radar emissions from the carrier, emissions from the prowler that we were running jamming on, and the radars that looked at us, and even UV, certainly higher, thinner air. Certainly we get exposed to more radiation that way. I truly believe it was a factor. And they're finding now that throughout studies that there's a lot of factors, not just cancer, but they're finding traumatic brain injuries on aviators, especially fighter pilots, where you sustained many, many high Gs. There's a lot of ongoing studies of how badly we beat up our bodies while doing that. And I got to be honest, I wouldn't trade a minute for it, for anything. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, and there's no question there are significant risk factors. There was a recent Pentagon study that showed that there's a 20% increase incidence of prostate cancer amongst fighter pilots. In addition, there's almost a 75 to 85% higher incidence of melanoma and other skin cancers in fighter pilots. And I don't know, were you asked to wear sunblock when you were up in flight?
No. That wasn't even a thing. Like I said, there's many things that I'm paying for now, to include hearing and back pain and neck pain and shoulder and everything else that, landing on an aircraft carrier multiple times and taking catapult shots and pulling 8, 9 Gs certainly took its toll.
So there's probably a lot of people listening who are thinking, holy, I fly across the country and I'm on the jet a lot. I may be at increased risk. Well, the statistics show that it would take 1,000 flights cross country to equal the amount of radiation exposure from one CAT scan. So there's very, very little exposure for people who routinely fly in commercial airlines. You know, I know that this is a big deal. Do people talk to you at all about, in the military? Have you had a chance to converse with other fighter pilots who are going through similar stories of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm certainly involved with a lot of my classmates, and we have a group of golf guys that get together. And anytime I can speak to anyone, peers, whether they're in the military or not, certainly I'm a huge advocate of getting tested and staying on top of your health that way.
Yeah, well, as you know, the guidelines have been really muddied, and they've been muddied for a long time, not just recently. And they still don't include fighter pilots as a high-risk category with any of the significant guidelines that are within the community that we use, such as in the NCCN National Comprehensive Cancer Network or the United States Preventative Service Task Force. So it's really a challenge for all of us. And you were very fortunate. I have to give a lot of credit to you and to the physicians that you saw in the military who were so proactive and screened you starting at age 40, because at that time you were not considered high risk. You were just considered standard risk, which would have meant that according to any guideline that was available, you wouldn't have started until age 50, which
Right.
means that in all reality, you probably wouldn't be with us today.
Correct. Yep. 8 years would have been a long 8 years with cancer.
It is a long time. Healthcare is really important. What role do you think healthcare has played in your life retrospectively?
I think now, as I'm getting older and actually realizing that I'm human more and more, but I really believe that, looking back, I feel like I should have been more proactive in my own healthcare. The challenges for military aviators, especially fighter pilots, is we never want to leave the cockpit. Never, for any reason. So we don't talk about things that are bothering us and anything that might be hurting us physically, mentally, anything. It's not discussed, and we don't bring it up because we don't want to leave the cockpit. I'll give you one that I probably shouldn't, but they can't send me back to sea. I had a broken hand, and I flew anyways. I flew until I couldn't stand the pain anymore, and then I finally went and saw the flight doc and said, I kind of hurt my hand. I think I need to get it checked. And of course, I got x-rayed, it got put in a cast, and I was out of the cockpit for 6 to 8 weeks. But not that I didn't try to fly with that broken hand for multiple flights. So I think that for military aviators, it's difficult because we're not proactive with our health, and we pay for it later on. I think I'm much more in tune to it now.
I don't think there's any question that you're an epitome of the male psyche. And people always ask, why is it that men don't get health care? And it's because they want to stay in their cockpit for life. That's what they want to do. And so they aren't going to be proactive. And it's not because they don't want to be proactive. It's that they're happy where they're at. And they want to be in their cockpit, controlling their world, controlling their lives. And the minute you leave your cockpit, you're no longer in control. And that's not where you want to be. And so I think that that's why most men are not out there seeking health care. And we have to find ways to bring it to men so that they don't have to be as proactive and they can include it in their natural repertoire and daily lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that's...
You stay active, though. You're still fit? Still staying in shape?
I am. I'm very fit with some limitations. Certainly, we discussed a few. There's certainly damage that I've done to my body over the days I was a wrestler at the Naval Academy. I'm paying for a lot of that. Certainly, flying fighters for 20 years took a massive toll on my spine, my neck, my back, shoulders, knees, you name it. There's always aches and pains, but I stay active. I get up in the morning. I still work out. During the week, I still walk a golf course. I refuse to take a golf cart. I wear braces where I need to. Certainly limit how much I have to bend over to get the ball, but I stay active, and I truly do advocate for putting what's right into my body. So I try to eat as healthy as possible.
Well, I think that's great. If you can reverse any of the damage that you've absorbed through all the years, it's a great thing. And it's great to see you being as proactive as you are. So you lived a life of fighter pilot. Not many of us can say that, especially me. And you have this kind of need for speed still. How do you satisfy that need for speed?
Well, I do have a lot of high horsepower cars. the more horsepower, the better. In fact, I've gotten to the stupid horsepower in my cars is what I say. But my son, who's special needs, he's the perfect son. He just loves violent motion and loud noises. So we go turn gas into noise. I still do fly a couple different airplanes. I have a little experimental that I built when I was a pilot out in the desert. That was 25 years ago. I still fly it today. And my friends and I have gotten into old World War II biplanes, which is a different kind of flying altogether, but it is open cockpit, loud, and just fun, but really slow. So I still have my hand in the flying, but only on nice weather days. You can't get me going when the weather's bad. The Navy made me do that. I don't have to do that now. So that kind of fulfills my need, but I still try and chase the thrill of the catapult shot, and I can't get there anymore unless the Navy calls me back up, and I don't think that's happening.
Well, I love the fact you're into cars and planes and keeping so relatable and just engaged. It's just great. It's the best way to go through life. Do you think there's any way we can ever convince guys to take care of themselves like they do their cars?
Yeah, that's a great lead-in, Doc. If we could do that, I think we could get rid of prostate cancer altogether. We'll have a lot of people taking care of themselves and getting early checks. And yeah, you definitely see that. I do the same. Take care of my car. I try to take care of myself as good as I do my car, but sometimes maybe not. But that's a good point.
I think it would work if we could get guys to really be just more proactive and step out of their cockpit, as you alluded to before. I think it's really hard, but we need people like you out there. What kind of discussions do you have with other men who are prostate cancer survivors?
That's a good point. In fact, two of my classmates, one very close to a golf friend of mine, who called me up and had gotten diagnosed. And he had 1,000 questions. We went through my recovery. And again, that's just one. So I put him in touch with some advocacy groups and different resources as far as what to expect. Mine is just one outcome, and there's hundreds of outcomes, right? So I tried to get him in touch with as many people as I possibly could and talk about, the recovery versus what to expect post-surgery, how quick the recovery would be. And that's happened several times with local friends of mine. And then as I've been speaking to anyone and everyone, I'm not shy to speak to anyone. When I look at somebody that might be my age, I ask about their PSA. I ask about what they're doing and how they're checking. A lot of them shrug their shoulders, and then I give them my experience and say, hey, it's a test. Ask your doctor. Make it happen. Follow your health.
You know what I get all the time whenever I ask men about, what their PSA is, they'll say, well, I was told it was normal. And I go, you got to do better than that. You got to know a number. A number is really key, because what some physicians consider normal is not really normal. And also what's normal may not be normal for you. And so I think it's really important that men know their numbers. And it's not just your PSA. You should know your blood pressure, and you should know your blood count, and you should know your cholesterol levels. And you should be aware of the numbers that are really key to your overall survival. And I just think it's a shame that men are just not more engaged in knowing their numbers.
Yeah, that's a true statement, Doc. And again, I think it's ingrained in men to stand there as a pillar and say, I'm strong and I'm going to keep in my path and keep moving forward. But yeah, like you said, get out of your cockpit and get out and take care of yourself. Could save your life, right?
Yeah, men in general, once they're diagnosed with prostate cancer, they retract within their own world, and they don't talk about it with anyone. They don't share it with anyone. They keep it all to themselves. And as a result, we have very few men like you who are advocates for prostate cancer survivorship, advocates for men's health, advocates to get other men engaged and involved and proactive. I know you believe that this screening probably saved your life, and I know we've talked about that already. Do you feel this is your new mission in life?
I wish I could say it is. It's part of my everyday. It's routinely, it happens, I'll call it weekly, where I see a gentleman that's, in my age group, 40 plus. And I certainly ask. There's no reason not to. I'm not shy about it. I know for a fact that early detection saved my life. So if I can help one person, 10, doesn't matter. I'm not shy about asking. And I ask a lot. And it's eyebrow raising where guys will go, I never even thought about it, and I bring it up. I'm shocked that more men don't, especially survivors. I would think that they would. Maybe we can change that directive and get more men that have survived speaking about it. And I guess the more we get out there and the more we keep talking about it, maybe we can break those few out and people will talk about it.
Yeah. Well, the guidelines are really muddy, and I think that's part of the issue that we live within right now. You were screened, as you said, starting at age 40, even though that wasn't part of the guidelines. And we still have guidelines that start screening at age 55 and quit at age 69. It's very hard to find any guideline that goes past the age of 70. And we know that there are men getting prostate cancer who have at least 10 years of survivorship after the age of 70. So there's this, what I call chronological ageism, where guys basically are tapped out and not included and excluded from any type of diagnostic opportunities to save their lives from a disease that might potentially kill them. I know that that's important to you. If you were to go out there and change the guidelines, who would you get involved and how would you get people involved? And how would you see a way to get them changed and get guys more active and engaged?
Well, I think certainly the government has to have some culpability in this. And I think maybe it comes down to cost if it's the government or the insurance. If they keep pushing it to the right, if I would have followed the guidelines to 50, I may not be here. And I was one of the lucky ones that had the early scans. So who are we missing? How many people are we missing from 40 to 50 or 40 to 55? That's an awful long time. And then, as you said, I didn't realize it stops at age 70. Well, my uncle is 94. If he stopped at 70 and actually was diagnosed somewhere between 70 and, who knows, even 80, he probably wouldn't be here. I don't understand the hesitancy to continue to test across all ages, starting as early as possible. It's a blood test, so what? Can't we find that cost somewhere?
If we go back into the 90s and the 2000s, when prostate cancer screening was just in its infancy using PSA blood testing, there was this concern that we were overdiagnosing prostate cancer, that we were over-screening for prostate cancer. And in reality, there was some truth to that because there was a knee-jerk reflex that if you had an elevated PSA, you automatically get a biopsy and you automatically get treated. But the reality is that it's not that anymore. And that we now have the advances in what we call liquid biopsy testing, or what we call prostate biomarkers, which will give us an inkling as to whether or not you might have prostate cancer or not. And we can use these tools to help determine whether or not you're at increased risk for prostate cancer. And if so, are you at increased risk for a clinically significant prostate cancer? So our goal is to change the paradigm of screening, to try and democratize screening so that all men can get screened on a level playing field, whether you're near a big university, whether you're in the military, or whether you're out in the rural community. Everybody should get the same access to screening and care and treatment opportunities. And that's really the mission that we have as our foundation, and appreciate having someone like you who can share their personal story, which is so important and shows that if you had been followed and screened according to guidelines, you might not be here today.
Yeah, and especially with the advances that obviously you're much more in tune with than I am. The advances that I understand are much better at early detection and follow-on care and the path that you go. And as we get better in that, why not include a bigger population, an earlier population, a later population? And we're going to save the lives of more men doing that.
Yeah, knowledge is power. And I think it's important that, men be back in control. It's like being, again, back in that cockpit. You said to me that you're receiving your wings as a naval aviator was your biggest highlight of your life. Tell me what that was all about and what was that like?
That was a huge moment in my life. From an early young child, or just it's called child in my teens, I looked up at the sky and he used to have these A4s that were flying over my head into NAS Willow Grove. And I kind of wanted to do that. And my mom looked at me and she said, "You better study." So I did. And I followed that path and I pounded myself at school and I did get an appointment to the Naval Academy, as we discussed. And again, head against the brick wall. I managed to get a good enough GPA and grade point to get a naval aviation slot. So it was on my way. And then once I got to flight school, it was, for me, flight school was just fun. I would call it a natural, but when I got into the airplane, it was like, yeah, this was what I was meant to do. And by the time I got to advanced training and jet training, you go to the aircraft carriers, your last stop before you get your wings. And when you get your last landing and they say, congratulations, you're a qual, and you get that last catapult off the flight deck, beautiful day in San Diego, fly back to Miramar at that time, and knowing that, you know, my next step is getting those wings of gold that I worked so hard for, not just flight school, but all the schooling that led up to that. It was a huge, huge point in my life, and my family was there, and it was a big deal.
Doing things not only for yourself, but you've also done it for our country. And I truly appreciate that, because I've never been in the military, and I know how important it is to have people like you doing what you do for all of us. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, life's going on. You've had a great career, and you're raising a family, and you're a prostate cancer survivor. Do you ever contemplate your own mortality, especially with regards to, you know, you're caring for a special needs son?
It's tough talking to a fighter pilot about that. The one thing I always told my mom when I was flying jets and flying combat missions and all that, and she was always worried about what I was going to do and what I was going to see. And I always told her that if I don't come back, just know I did not come back with a smile on my face. I achieved what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I'm serving my country. I'm doing what I was meant to do. And if I don't make it at the end of the day, just know I died doing exactly what I wanted to do. I think as I get a little bit older, my risk taking has gone down. I still fly, but I don't fly with the same, let's call it, rigor as I did when I was in the military. I definitely try to take care of myself. I want to be here for my children. I want to be here for my family. So I think as a younger man that was single, is a little different than the 55-year-old man you're seeing now. But yeah, I think trying to take care of myself and take slightly less risks is certainly something I do now.
Yeah. So I guess the last question I have for you is, what was your last PSA?
It was negligible, which is good, but I am due for another one here in October. So I check every year, and I get my ultra-sensitive PSA, and so far so good. 2011 till now, got a pretty good track record.
And that's worth celebrating.
Thank you, sir.
I want to give special thanks to our guest today, Commander Reiner, for just a great conversation and talking about prostate cancer survivorship and his personal story. And thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Michael Lutz, urologist and founder of the Michigan Men's Health Foundation. Through our events, resources, and this podcast, we're dedicated to men's health advocacy and awareness. We're focused on education, research, and treatment of prostate cancer and men's health-related issues. For more information about the work we do and how you can get involved, visit us online at www.michiganmenshealthfoundation.org.